Let's talk about the scientific method.
Before we can get into any investigations, we first have to build the foundation for why we experiment. Observations happen every day, all the time, whether we want them to or not. It's an innate thing about humans. Observations use our five senses to pick up information all around us. For example, if I was to look at a person and see that they had a crinkled nose and squinted eyes, I could make an inference about what's going on. Inferences are just formed based on our observations.
Once we have an observation and we make a prediction using that observation, we have to test and experiment for exactly what's going on. I could see that somebody has a crinkled nose or squinted eyes and predict what is happening, but until I actually ask that person what is happening, I don't know for sure. So that's why it's really important for when we make these predictions to then test them. The scientific method or scientific investigation is a guide that we use in order to experiment and pan out our predictions. We have 7 steps in total, including question, research, hypothesis, experiment, record, conclusion, and communicate.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into each of these. The first one, question. This is what is the problem? What is the problem or observation we have seen and made an inference about? Number 2 is research.
It's totally fine if we find that somebody else has already done the experiment we're wanting to do. That's actually a good thing because it gives us a basis for how that experiment went. Maybe those people did something wrong and we don't want to make the same mistakes. Or maybe their hypothesis just completely was unsupported. That's important information for us to know. So it's okay if people have done this before and for us to continue to do it. That's actually how we form theories.
The next one, hypothesis. This is when we need to be specific about exactly what we're researching.
You'll hear it a lot that a hypothesis is an educated guess at a solution to our problem. That's because we have already done our research. We know exactly what we're going to be testing and how we're going to experiment. So by forming this hypothesis, we are educated. We already know what's going on and we have a good guess at what we can look at and form a prediction on.
And then number 4, when we actually get to the experiment, we are now testing our hypothesis. When we are done with our experiment, we gather up all of our data and we record it.
I don't know about you, but when I have a bunch of numbers just thrown at my eyeballs, I completely shut down. I don't comprehend them. I don't understand them. That's the same thing whenever we are experimenting. Sure, we might know what that data means to us, but to show it to other people, we have to make it look pretty. We have to put it in really nice graphs. We have to maybe put some colors on there and really show people exactly what our numbers mean when it comes to this data. Conclusions. People often really don't know what to write here. This is the spot where you can really highlight your experiment. You can explain to others what went on, what went right, what went wrong. Maybe you forgot to water your plants in your experiment for 3 days. That happens. And so this is where we can put in, hey, I made this mistake. It could have affected my data. And we went on with the experiment anyway.
Yeah. And then lastly, communication. So if we are big PhD people with lots of funding, we might go into the scientific journals or articles. If we don't, we might just put it out there on social media and have the world see via a picture. Or even word of mouth is just as good. So when we have experimented, gone through our scientific method, we still have to talk about certain aspects to it. Variables, for example, are different parts to our experiment. We have 3 types of variables within our experiment stage. The first type being independent. This is the one thing that we change on purpose. And I say one thing because if we choose 5 things to change and then gather all of our data, we're not really sure what exactly caused the change in our experiment. So we want to be sure. The second one is dependent. This is the thing that's being affected by our independent. It's also called our responding variable. And then lastly, we have the control, which is kept the same throughout the entire experiment. And the control is also really important because it's used for comparison at the end. If we don't have something to compare to at the end, we're not really sure if what we had changed might have been for the best. We need that standard piece to be able to compare to what we have changed in our experiment. And then lastly, in our conclusion, we also have two parts to this. We have two different observations we can use to help to explain to everyone exactly what went on. These are called qualitative and quantitative observations. Qualitative observations use our senses to write qualities about the experiment we just did. Creates the best texture in a chocolate chip cookie. We could use qualitative observations. On the opposite side of that, our quantitative or quantity observation uses numbers to explain the experiment. So for example, if we added 50 grams of chocolate chips to cookie number 6, that would be a quantitative observation for our experiment. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below and let me know what you want me to do a video over next.